Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started.
We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear.
America is back. Is India.
It's the 31st of December, the end of another year, and I want to congratulate all of you for making it through this year. It wasn't easy. In a year like this, surviving is winning. So you're all winners, and that should be reason to cheer. I'll tell you what's special about year ends. They bring a sense of hope and change for the good. No matter how challenging the circumstances, you find optimism in the idea of a new beginning. And that is why we celebrate the coming of a new year. That's also why the first month of a year is called January. The word comes from Janus, the ancient Roman god of beginnings, the god of transitions, gates, passages. He has two faces, looking forward and backward. So as we step into January and 2022, tonight we'll look back and ahead. We'll talk about the year gone by, democracy in distress, big tech becoming big brother, wars, climate hypocrisy, China's expansionism, 10 things that define this year. We'll discuss them. We'll also talk about what lies ahead, the themes for 2022, mental health, the rise of middle powers, sports washing, hybrid working, and hopefully an end to the pandemic. We'll share our lists with you tonight, and we'd love to see yours too. We'll talk about resolutions, because what's a new year without a new list of old resolutions? Lots to talk about. Let's start with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Kremlin says Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned his US counterpart Joe Biden on the call that new Western sanctions against Russia could rupture existing ties between Moscow and Washington, and called it a colossal mistake. New pediatric COVID hospitalizations have hit a record high in the United States. US National Guard has been deployed to support overwhelmed hospital staff. England is building temporary hospitals to help cope with rising coronavirus cases, while Prime Minister Boris Johnson issues a stark warning to those not fully vaccinated. South Africa says its latest coronavirus wave has peaked without a surge in deaths or hospitalizations, enabling the country to lift a nightly curfew for the first time in 21 months. Chinese President Xi Jinping has delivered his televised New Year's Eve speech, stressing on the prosperity and stability of Hong Kong, Macau, and complete reunification of China. India has hit out at China for giving invented names to several places in its northeastern state of Arunachal Pradesh, with New Delhi asserting that the state is an integral part of India. The death toll from a police crackdown on the latest nationwide protests against military rule in Sudan has risen to 5. The protests were the 11th round of major demonstrations in Sudan since an October 25th coup that saw Abdallah Hamdok removed but then reinstated as Prime Minister. Activists hail Archbishop Desmond Tutu as a role model for fighting global injustice, as they pay their last respects to the anti-apartheid hero whose body lay in state at St. George's Cathedral in Cape Town. Australian batter Travis Head has tested positive for COVID-19, throwing more doubts over whether the remainder of the Ashes series will continue. Head is the first COVID case in the Australian camp, and the hosts have called up 3 players, Mitchell Marsh, Nick Maddison and Josh Inglis, as cover. There have also been 7 COVID cases in the England camp among support staff and travelling family members. Rafael Nadal has confirmed his bid for a record 21st Grand Slam title at the Australian Open. The Spaniard had contracted COVID-19 at an exhibition event in Abu Dhabi 2 weeks ago, raising fears that he might not travel to Melbourne for the year's first Grand Slam. But Nadal has landed in Australia and will be making his return to competitive action after a lengthy layoff due to a foot injury.
"2021. How do you look back at this year? Some highs, some lows, but many memories. We had huge expectations heading into 2021. It was called the year of recovery, the year we end this Wuhan virus pandemic. That was the hope. Instead, it's become the year that could have been, the year of missed opportunities. We saw old regimes fall, we saw new leaders rise, we saw superpowers flee, we saw helpless protesters face up to bullets. 2021 was a year like no other, and in the next 15 minutes, we bring you a recap. The highs, the lows, the wins, the failures, 10 things that made 2021 a year to remember. It started with a change in the White House. Donald Trump out, Joe Biden in. But things did not exactly go to plan. Trump supporters gathered at the U.S. Capitol on the 6th of January. They believed the election was rigged. What followed was the biggest challenge to U.S. democracy in decades.
They broke the glass.
Wasn't just America. Democracy was challenged elsewhere too. In India, the national capital was overrun on Republic Day. Protesting farmers rode in on trucks, on tractors. They clashed with police officers, ultimately reaching the Red Fort. On a day India established the rule of law, lawlessness gripped New Delhi. But India survived. Its democratic ethos stood the test of protest and violence. In Myanmar, the people weren't so lucky though. On the 1st of February, the Myanmar army organized a coup. All civilian leaders were arrested and the military took charge. Almost 11 months later, the people of Myanmar are still protesting. Their resolve and courage was one of the highlights of this year. And how can we forget Afghanistan? After 20 years in the wilderness, the Taliban returned. Afghan leaders fled their country. The Americans packed their bags. Kabul was captured, but all hope is not lost. Afghan women have emerged as a beacon of resistance. Covering their protests this year has been a privilege. Different countries, different cultures, but the same story, democracy in distress. The West's Coca-Cola flavored democracy is not universally usable. Countries that adapted to their local flavors survived, others did not. But as we move into the next year, the world and its leaders must emphasize on one key aspect. Democracy as a way of governance is non-negotiable. Much like vaccines this year, non-negotiable. Hands down, this is the biggest vaccination campaign in human history. 184 countries, 9.12 billion doses, almost 40 million shots per day. As we're calling it, a jab of life. But the jab of life came at a cost. Profits for Big Pharma, the big vaccine makers, are making a pandemic windfall. The likes of Pfizer and Moderna, they're earning $1,000 per second. They completely ignored poorer regions like Africa and Latin America. So what happened next should not surprise anyone.
We will continue to see variants emerge. We will continue to see variants of concern around the world, and we must do everything that we can to really limit the spread.
If we're going to take practical solutions, then waiver of intellectual property should be taken seriously.
Not to have equitable distribution of vaccines is not only a question of being immoral, it is also a question of being stupid.
Based upon the information that we have, particularly from South Africa, they have advised WHO that this variant should be classified as a variant of concern. So today we are announcing B11529 as a variant of concern named Omicron.
We had the vaccines, but we did not have a global plan to distribute them. And this was another feature of 2021, the lack of a unified response, not just against the virus, but also the country that exported the virus. In 2021, China's bullying continued. Last year, we were busy fighting COVID, but China was slowly charting its plan for world domination. 2021 was a bonus for them, another year of distractions. This time, their biggest target was Taiwan. Since Friday, China has had close to 100 military plane sorties near Taiwan. On Friday, 38 airplanes flew into Taiwan's air defense zone. On Saturday, the PLA broke that record. They sent 39 aircraft.
我们不会冒进，但绝对不要认为台湾人民会在压力下屈服。我们会持续充实国防，展现自我防卫的决心。
Beijing's claim to the vast majority of the South China Sea has no basis in international law. That assertion treads on the sovereignty of the states in the region.
Trung 敦促美方立即停止此类侵权挑衅行为，并将继续采取必要措施，坚定捍卫国家主权和安全，维护南海和平稳定。
Same old China threatening Taiwan, fishing in disputed waters and ignoring all criticism, not to mention international laws. The only organized opposition came from the Quad. Their leaders held their first in-person meet on the 24th of September. Joe Biden, Scott Morrison, Narendra Modi and Yoshihide Suga met at the White House. China was not mentioned at the summit, but the optics were enough to send tremors in Beijing. In West Asia, though, tremors seldom remain quiet. An old conflict was reignited this year, Israel versus Palestine. For 11 days, it was carnage. From Gaza, Hamas launched rockets into Israel, and Israel responded in kind. When the dust settled, the human cost was revealed. Over 254 Palestinians and 12 Israelis killed. The price of settling this old conflict, $500 million. We were constantly reporting on this war, the threats, the counter-threats, the reactions. So revisiting the story was not easy.
two ways that you can deal with them. You can either conquer them, and that's always an open possibility, or you can deter them. And we are engaged right now in forceful deterrence.
You never know where the next explosion, where the next rocket, or where the next Israeli airstrike is going to happen.
That was a conventional war. Two rivals on either side. But in 2021, we also fought an unconventional enemy, big tech. What did we learn about them this year? That they're listening, that they're snooping, and they don't care if we know. In early 2021, we got a notification from WhatsApp. It was a new privacy policy, accept it or lose access to WhatsApp. What did this policy mean? Data from WhatsApp could be accessed by Facebook companies like Instagram. It's a big red flag. So Indian users were up in arms. They got ample support from the government, which asked WhatsApp to withdraw the policy. Finally, they relented. They've put the new privacy policy on hold. So your data is safe, at least for the moment. But over in America, things got ugly. Tech CEOs were dragged down to Congress. Some of the most powerful men in the world had no answers to basic questions.
I want to start by asking all three of you if your platform bears some responsibility for disseminating disinformation related to the election.
Chairman, I think our responsibility is to build systems that can help.
Mr. Zuckerberg, I just want a yes or no answer, okay?
Congressman, our responsibility is to make sure that we build effective systems to help fight this.
The gentleman's choice is not to answer the question. Mr. Pichai, yes or no?
We always feel a deep sense of responsibility, but I think we worked hard. This election effort was one of our most substantive efforts.
Is that a yes or a no?
Congressman, it's a complex question.
Okay, we'll move on. Mr. Dorsey.
Yes, but you also have to take into consideration a broader ecosystem. It's not just about the technology platforms we use.
Simple question, but no straight answers. Towards the end of this year, we learned more about how toxic big tech was, thanks to whistleblower Frances Haugen. Her claims were damning. Facebook knew about the harm it was causing. It knew it was sowing division. It knew that children were depressed after logging in. But Mark Zuckerberg couldn't care less. He was probably busy threatening Australia. Yes, that happened too. For almost a week, Australians could not share news on Facebook. It wasn't a technical glitch. It was revenge. Australia was asking tech giants to pay for news, which is a fair request. But Facebook did not want to. So what did they do? They stopped Australians from viewing or sharing news. Classy from big tech Zuckerberg. And if social media was making people depressed, sports icons were asking us to seek help. One of the better things in 2021, I would say, more awareness on mental health, more people seeking help. And a lot of credit goes to our sporting stars, Naomi Osaka, Simone Biles. They're young and successful. So when they talked, the world listened.
It would be a little bit better to take a back seat, work on my mindfulness, and I knew that the girls would do an absolutely great job, and I didn't want to risk the team a medal for kind of my screw-ups.
It's a serious disease that really goes unnoticed, and when you're dealing with the mind and a person's mentality like that, that has to be taken into consideration.
Well, she's a young lady with a lot of pressure upon her. It can happen to any one of us.
I know some of us are going through the same things, and we're always told to push through it, but we're all a little bit older now, and we could kind of speak for ourselves.
And not only did they listen, they agreed. Let's face it, this year has been hard for most of us. It's like the planet is trying to kill us. Climate change, COVID-19, many of us were feeling depressed or anxious. This year, people Googled how to maintain mental health more than ever before. Clearly, they were concerned, and with good reason. In 2021, depression has risen 27%. Anxiety has gone up by 25%. Nothing gets us worked up like a once-in-a-century pandemic. But the good news is, people are seeking help. They're booking therapy sessions. They're talking about mental health. In a year where our bodies were taking a beating, our mind was certainly getting some good attention. If only our planet could get the same focus. Unfortunately, it isn't. 2021 was marked by massive climate catastrophes, biblical floods, stinging droughts, supercharged tornadoes. All of this, of course, cost a lot of money. The 10 biggest climate disasters of this year resulted in damages worth $170 billion. We had heat waves in Canada, flash floods in Germany, bushfires in America. The pictures were extremely compelling, but not compelling enough for our world leaders to act. In late 2021, we had the COP26 summit in Glasgow, or as we like to call it, the Flop 26. 400 private jets landed in Scotland. We had world leaders, we had corporate bigwigs, all of them flying in with a trail of smoke. They came with a message for the planet. And that's all they had. Words, not actions.
It is time to come together for future generations in ways that none of us really ever thought we might have an opportunity to do.
This is no longer a climate conference. This is now a global North Greenwash Festival. A 2-week-long celebration of business as usual and blah, blah, blah.
That's pretty much what it was. A lot of stunts with little substance. Humanity's campaign against climate change is stuck. Much like this ship was in the Suez Canal. What a meme fest it was. This 400-meter-long ship ever given got stuck in the Suez Canal. What followed was the biggest traffic jam in human history. At least 369 ships were waiting behind. Around $9.6 billion worth of trade was halted. And of course, the endless memes. But jokes aside, this was a big lesson for the world. Global trade has too many bottlenecks. And if those bottlenecks close, you may not have ketchup with your burger or cola with your fries. I'm not kidding. In April this year, America had a major ketchup shortage. Most restaurants were opting for packets instead of bottles, and producers simply could not keep up. It was a proper sauce-ageddon. The same thing happened to our appliances and cars. No semiconductors. The shortage began last year, but in 2021, it became much bigger. The auto industry, for instance, lost $210 billion in revenue. You probably couldn't get your favorite phone to, or a new laptop. So going into 2022, we need to make our supply chains more resilient. You cannot depend on one country or one shipping route for that. If you do, your next burger may not have ketchup on the side. Unless, of course, you're Jeff Bezos or Richard Branson, in which case earthly problems don't concern you. 2021 was the year of space tourism. The super rich blasted off into space, took a trip around the earth and came back all smiles. There was one brief effort to keep Jeff Bezos in orbit, but it was never going to work out. This year will always be remembered in the history of space exploration, not just because the private sector joined the race, but because we as a species reached new places. Here's a quick look back.
To all you kids down there, I was once a child with a dream, looking up to the stars. Now I'm an adult in a spaceship with lots of other wonderful adults looking down to our beautiful, beautiful Earth.
My expectations were high and they were dramatically exceeded.
Good orbit injection allows to have more fuel on board of the spacecraft. And therefore the James Webb Space Telescope can have a long life and therefore bring a lot of exciting science.
science and perseverance, the two things that made this year memorable. If you combine them, what do you get? Trailblazing startups. 2021 was the year of the unicorn, or unicorns. Entrepreneurs pushed through the pandemic to create billion-dollar success stories. India led the way. 39 Indian startups hit billion-dollar valuations this year. Only the US and China have more unicorns than India now. It's quite an inspirational story. Pandemics are business killers, we know. You have lockdowns, mask mandates, but startups pulled through. They raised $6.1 billion through IPOs this year. Fintech firms raised $10.6 billion. 9 e-commerce companies hit $1 billion evaluation. Makes you wonder, how did tiny startups succeed where big heritage companies failed? Because they innovated. The last 2 years have been all about adapting cheat codes to circumvent the pandemic. Startups around the world did exactly that, and now they're growing into unicorns. More power to them. So as we wrap the year, and before you open the champagne, how about reading some tea leaves? Let's talk about the themes that will shape the year ahead. What will 2022 be all about? Will the pandemic end? Will China be made to pay finally? Will you be able to travel? Take up that new course that you've always wanted? We hope the answer to all of these questions is yes, but we don't know for sure. Here is what we think the broad trends will look like. Number one, middle powers will shape geopolitics. They will rise. As the US loses face and China loses friends, middle powers like India, France, Brazil, Germany and the UK will influence world affairs. Look at what's happened in the last couple of years. Starting with China, all the king's checkbooks and all the king's wolf warriors could not put Humpty Dumpty together again. China's standing in the world today is at its lowest. The Wuhan virus did not help. The bullying made it worse. From America to Japan to Australia to Japan to Canada, in fact, China has picked up fights with almost every country. It continues to bury partners under debt. It alienated friends, blacklisted a top Sri Lankan bank, pushed Russia on its turf in Central Asia, continued its expansionist policies and refused to resolve the border standoff with India. China's only friends now are North Korea and Pakistan. As for the United States, its superpowerdom suffered under Donald Trump. Joe Biden's Afghanistan exit left it in shreds. The Black Lives Matter protest in 2020, the storming of the US Capitol Hill in 2021, America's humiliating retreat from Afghanistan, its confused policy in West Asia, its inability to deal with Russia or Iran for that matter, all of it has dented its image. So allies are wary. There is a power vacuum and no force for constructive change. And that's where the middle powers come in. With their growing economies and rising geopolitical stature, these countries will establish a multipolar order with alliances to suit their national interest and not beholden to superpowers that can ditch them. Theme number 2, mind over body, increased focus on mental health, and mind sight, which is the ability to analyze your internal emotional world and restore order there. A lot of us confuse health with physical well-being. We exercise, we eat healthy, we drink water, we sleep on time, and yet we don't feel great sometimes. And that's because we're not focusing on mental health. The pandemic made us acknowledge how important it is. The year ahead will push it in the mainstream. Your thoughts are your mental link to your environment. They allow you to assess your situation. They allow you to make choices in life. If your thoughts are positive, your body will be healthy, and studies have proven this. Those who suffer from mental health issues have a higher chance of health complications, chronic diseases, obesity, or a weakened immune system. 2022 will be a year to focus on this mind-body connection. If you're stressed, your body reacts as if it's under attack. It releases hormones that increase blood pressure. If you're happy and optimistic, it releases chemicals that boost your healing power. We've studied all of this in school. This year, there's a higher chance we'll apply it in our adult lives, or so we hope. Trend number 3, the great reshuffle. Rethinking careers, rethinking priorities, rethinking workplaces and relationships. Our world has changed dramatically. Our job is now a part of our life and not our life. Is it worth the stress? More and more people are asking this question and making new beginnings. This trend will continue in 2022. Earlier this year, we told you about the Great Resignation. A record 4.3 million Americans resigned in the month of August alone. A Microsoft survey suggests that 41% of the global workforce is considering quitting their jobs. 46% are planning a major career transition. What does this mean for employers? Talent will rule the roost. Talent retention will be the biggest challenge going forward. A LinkedIn survey has thrown up some interesting points on what triggered this reshuffle. The virus, of course, tops the list. It made us look at work differently. We want flexibility, we want hybrid working. Location-neutral teams are a thing. They will be the trend going forward. The second factor behind this reshuffle is the shifting work dynamic. The world is focusing on economic recovery, so companies want the best and the brightest. The demand for talent has shot up. Employers are vying for good resources and not vice versa. Not all skills come from work experience. Companies are looking for broader talent pools. They're focusing on skills over degrees. The third reason is simply the yearning for a fresh start. The pandemic pulled brakes on all our plans. So after 2 years of this forced and painful emergency mode, a lot of people have decided to work on themselves and for themselves. This disruption is here to stay. So if you're an employer, embrace it. Innovate, adapt, and you'll come out on top. The next theme is sports washing. What's that? It's simply using sport as a political tool. In 2021, a lot of governments used prestigious sporting events to boost their reputation or to simply airbrush human rights abuses. And that's a problematic trend. It will continue in the coming year. In February, the Beijing Winter Olympics will begin, the Genocide Games. Despite China's abysmal human rights record and the genocide of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, despite the forced disappearances of athletes like Peng Shuai, China will host these games. Then we have Qatar. This year, Formula One made its debut in Qatar. In 2022, they will hold the FIFA World Cup. Notwithstanding allegations of censorship and oppression of women in this country. Saudi Arabia too is using high-profile sporting events in a bid to rebrand itself. According to one report, Riyadh has spent $1.5 billion on sports washing. It's hosting golf tournaments, acquiring football clubs, and hiring some of the best athletes as brand ambassadors. Yes, the country is making progress on several fronts, but its deep pockets are washing out the challenges that remain. Now, here's the thing. A sporting event cannot be a tool for states to hide their oppression. Sport is all about a fair and equal contest. Sports washing undermines that spirit. Unfortunately, it will continue in the year ahead. What about the economy? We are entering another seesaw year. The pandemic has spelled doom for the global economy. Lockdowns have infected growth. Variants are boosting uncertainty. As we enter 2022, this uncertainty shall persist. We are starting the year with an Omicron surge. It will hurt business. It will impact growth and recovery. But the virus and its variants are only one challenge for businesses. Supply chain disruptions are also hurting them. They stalled much of the global recovery last year. Shipping snarls left companies scampering for raw material. There were empty shelves at supermarkets. Chip shortage hit the auto sector. These supply bottlenecks will continue to hamper growth in 2022. Then we have inflation. It's not getting better anytime soon. Supply shortage, along with sudden demand, has pushed global inflation to multi-year highs. In the United States, core inflation has soared to a 29-year high. And this has spooked investors. They fear that central banks will be forced to prematurely raise interest rates to tame soaring prices. It's a bit of a vicious cycle, you could say. And finally, we have China. It may export a financial pandemic now. China is suffering an economic slowdown, like a lot of other countries, only its impact is bigger. The world's second largest economy is cracking down on almost everything from Alibaba and Tencent to Evergrande and Kaisa. Beijing's crackdown is adding to investor worries. As Xi Jinping ramps up his rhetoric and China's economy slows, the repercussions are going to be global. Theme number 6. Survival of the sustainable. With due apologies to Charles Darwin, the fittest is not enough anymore. Climate change is here, and sustainable solutions are the only way to deal with it. The world has been talking about this for a while now. It will be forced to walk the talk in the coming year. The COP26 summit in Glasgow failed. Surveys say starting 2022, global emissions will be back to pre-pandemic levels. The world is expected to emit 420 billion tons of carbon dioxide. 420 billion. While major economies refuse to keep their end of the bargain, smaller countries are showing the way. Chile, for instance, just rewrote its constitution to take on climate change. The electric vehicle train is accelerating. The global EV market is projected to grow by more than 26% in the coming year. India alone plans to invest $15 billion in the EV market. Oil-dependent economies are working on diversification. They're investing money in renewable sources of energy like Saudi Arabia. It is planning a pivot away from oil. It plans to generate 50% of its energy from renewables by 2030. In fact, the United Nations has proclaimed this year, 2022, as the year of basic sciences for sustainable development. It says 2022 will mobilize world leaders to put more effort into sustainable development. Here's hoping that happens. And finally, the question that we've all been asking for 2 years. When will this end? Will 2022 be the year of the end of the pandemic? After 2 years of devastation, things were finally starting to look better. Then came Omicron and clouded our hopes. Every day brings new figures, new cases and newer worries. We're back to familiar territory, back to keeping a check on updated curbs and guidelines, travel restrictions. But there's still hope. The World Health Organization says this virus may not disappear, but the acute phase of the pandemic might just, meaning the worst may be behind us. We may not be able to eradicate the virus, but we may see it move out of the pandemic phase and turn into an endemic. The global health body has also added that this will only happen if every country ends up vaccinating at least 70% of its total population. So what we need to do as we enter 2022 is to ensure an equitable access of vaccines for all. At the same time, we cannot afford to let our guard down. We still need to take precautions, monitor our symptoms, adopt healthier habits, keep the mask on, and not lose hope. That's the most important. And that brings us back to New Year celebrations. How do you celebrate it usually? Do you go out with friends? Or is it just a quiet night with a book? The New Year that we are currently celebrating follows the Gregorian calendar, 365 days or 12 months in a year. But that is not the only New Year celebration across the world. Here's a roundup of different cultures and regions and how they celebrate their New Year.
Marking a new year. It has been an age-old tradition, celebrating with friends, families and loved ones. But does the whole world have the same New Year? The New Year Day usually varies between cultures, religions and even calendars. The most common is the Georgian New Year. It is marked on the 1st of January. The world runs on the Gregorian calendar, 365 days or 12 months in a year. The year ends on the 31st of December. As the clock strikes 12, we have a new year. But not all countries celebrate New Year's Day on January the 1st. Like the Lunar New Year, the exact date changes every year, but it is mostly associated to the Chinese New Year. The Lunar New Year is celebrated widely in East Asia. Fireworks are lit, houses are decluttered, and sweets are distributed as a sign of health and fortune. In Iran and Afghanistan, people come together to celebrate Nowruz, also known as Iranian or Persian New Year. It commences on the spring equinox. The idea is to celebrate the rebirth of nature. It is a time for family gatherings and feasts, street festivals and sports across the region. In neighboring Israel, Jews celebrate New Year during Rosh Hashanah, which means head of the year. It is a time of rejoicing and introspection. Traditions include sounding the shofar or ram's horn and eating foods like dates, beets and pomegranates. In India, New Year means something different for everyone. The Hindu New Year, or Vikram Samvat, begins with the new moon of the month of Chaitra. For other states like West Bengal and Kerala, the New Year is usually the first day of Vaishakha. People all around the globe ring in the New Year, but not all of us celebrate the same way. As the world steps into yet another new year, the idea remains the same. Taking stock of the year that is gone and greeting the new one ahead. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And finally, your New Year resolution. Do you have a list yet? Are you going to recycle last year's list? Do you think there's no point making one? Whatever be your answer, this story is for you. Let's start with the word resolution. It has many meanings. In the current context, resolution means a formal expression of will or intent. It shows commitment and purpose. Do you know what's the most popular New Year resolution? Losing weight. It beats everything hands down. Gym memberships soar in the first month of every year. Slowly, life takes over. Does that mean resolving is a waste of time? I'd say it's not. Make that list. It will give you a sense of purpose. Also, 1 week of exercise is better than none, so go for it. And don't beat yourself up for not being able to achieve it 100%. It's okay. In fact, as per some new age management theories, it's better that you don't deliver 100%. Let me tell you about one such. It's called OKR. That's short for Objective Key Responsibility. So you set an objective and spell out the key responsibility to achieve it. You could say it's a more structured resolution/goal plan. And in this, you're encouraged to stretch your targets. So not achieving all of it is better than achieving all of it. If only someone had told me about this in school. Anyway, now that the pressure of delivering has been lowered, thanks to OKRs, let's look at what kind of resolutions people set. Look at the findings of a survey. About 1 in 4 Americans made a list in 2020. Most of them resolved to exercise more, improve their diet, lose weight, and save money. How many of them do you think achieved their targets? 49% said that they kept some, but not all of them. Over in Britain, fewer people are setting New Year resolutions this time than they did last year. For some, it has become a far overused cliche. But for others, it is like a solemn promise. Again, health and fitness top the list for Britons too. What about you? What do you want from yourself in 2022? I have some suggestions. Number 1, don't aim for weight loss, try holistic health. I know it's easier said than done, but you won't know until you give it a shot. Number 2, see your growth beyond your job, your designation. Your life is more than your job. We all know this, yet we limit our perception of ourselves to our office. This new year, focus on your self-worth. Number 3, read. Books, not diamonds, are your best friends. Don't leave them. Number 4, social media detox. It kills time. It feeds toxicity. Give yourself a break this year. I'm not saying leave social media. That's your choice entirely. Maybe a demand of your job too. But don't be chained to it. Use your time and mind space judiciously. And number 5, spend more time with family. Don't wait for a lockdown to bake with your children or watch a movie with your parents. Show the people you love that you care. Well, this was my list. I'd love to see yours, so write to us. Most importantly, stay safe. Have a happy and healthy new year. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. See you in 2022.
नमस्कार। दिवाली की शॉपिंग और ट्रैवलिंग से जनता की गाड़ियों पर काफी असर पड़ा है। गाड़ियों पर डेंट, स्क्रैचेस और वेयर एंड टेयर भी देखने को मिल रहा है, लेकिन घबराने की कोई बात नहीं। गो मैकेनिक, भारत की नंबर 1 कार सर्विस ऐप टॉप क्वालिटी कार सर्विसेज पर आपको दे रही है भारी छूट। तो देर ना करें और आज ही डाउनलोड करें।
Book now and get flat 500 off.